Hello everyone, this is Kat and welcome back to Generation Zero. And today we'll be covering all of the different weapons in the game, generally their pros and cons, where to use them, what ammunition types and attachments they accept, and etc. etc. I will be covering them all at their highest quality except for experimental level, because not every weapon has experimental variants. I do have a separate video on experimental weapons, which will be linked in the description below. That's it. Let's get started with the Muller PP semi-automatic pistol. It has 8 rounds without upgrades, but with a maximum level of its own extended magazine. Generally, every single weapon has their own extended magazine. There are a handful of exceptions, but most of them they have their unique extended magazine. You have to collect your own extended magazine for each weapon you have separately. They're not cross-compatible. But on the Mario PP, the extended magazine upgrades the magazine capacity to 16. It uses the .32 ACP, a hollow point or full metal jacket ammunition types, which are the most common ammunition types of the game. It has a pretty high rate of fire, of course being semi-automatic, pretty decent reload time, and a pretty tight grouping. The .32 ACP is the white box and can be found all the way around the starter area up to our assault helmet, and that's where this pistol shines. The other two ammunition types are really rare in these areas, and because of that, it's the only real one that you can use there. But after you reach this safe house up here, there's no real reason to keep using it because the other ammunition types have become plentiful by then. And overall, mainly the Glock, which we're going to go in after this, will outperform the Mauler PP because it's abysmal damage output. It does have 200 rounds per ammunition slot, so you can carry quite a lot of ammunition with it. But because it's lower damage, you do also have to use said ammunition quite a lot. It does accept the handgun silencer, and it has no real downside of having that one, so if you have one, put it on basically. But only if you haven't put it on your Glock pistol already. Because the Glock 17 is probably the best secondary weapon, of course, in my own opinion, at this rarity. And because it's the only one with the experimental, and the experimental being strictly better than the Glock 17, makes the experimental Glock actually the only real option in the secondary slot. That said, the Glock 17 has a base ammo capacity of 17, and with the magazine extender goes up to 25. That's pretty much the same rate of fire and reload speed as the Muller, but has a really high amount of recoil. The grouping is pretty tight still, but you definitely notice it climb up a lot. It also accepts the handgun silencer, and the ammunition it uses the 9mm handgun, which is the blue 9mm ammunition variant. The SMG uses the brown variant, which are not cross-compatible, so you have to use the specific variant for this weapon. It only carries 120 rounds per slot compared to 200 from the .32 ACP, but 120 is still plenty, and you generally only really need to carry the one slot of ammunition in the gun itself. You don't really need to carry backup ammunition because you're rarely using it because your primary weapons are enough to deal with pretty much anything, and only when you're out of ammo on those two and you have like one or two enemies left and you don't really feel like reloading would you pick out your secondary. The experimental Glock does of course have the stun effect, but again that can be all explained in the separate video. And lastly, in terms of secondary weapons, we have the .44 Magnus, or otherwise known as the .44 Magnum. And it is kind of unique because it accepts the .4 times handgun scope, and also has the handgun compensator as a unique attachment that are not accepted by the other two pistols. It does accept the handgun silencer as well, so you can make this thing silenced, but the handgun compensator reduces recoil, and you kinda want that. Because this is pretty much a sniper weapon, and you can definitely see how much it climbs up, but it does try to compensate for it, but that said, if you keep on shooting, it will definitely go up in a straight line. It has the highest accuracy among the three weapons. You can see it already by just the crosshair and standing still, but it's even better in the scope. And it uses the .44 full metal jacket or hollow point ammunition. The biggest problem with this weapon is the rarity of the ammunition. It is very, very rare, especially the full metal jacket variant. And of course, you really want to have the full metal jacket because it has better overall damage output and capabilities than the hollow point ammunition. It really hampers this weapon's performance. Because even just like the generally sniper rifles, not the entire the grenade Gewehr, but just the overall sniper weapons, have more common ammunition than the .44. And since it's kind of meant to be a secondary sniper, it really doesn't fit there. And I guess one thing that can be noted is that it does accept vision modules, including the full vision module. However, since you almost always are carrying a binoculars, at least like if you know what you're doing, you do really want to have the binoculars to be able to like identify enemy robots from longer distances. You will be carrying emission vision modules on there anyways, and I don't know if it's really worth to have multiple on the same character. Having one on each character is definitely a must, but having more than one on a single character is generally considered overkill. So overall, as a verdict between the three pistols, Molar PP definitely good starter weapon, but gets outclassed by the other two at when reaching further into the game, and overall the Glock at beyond the starter level always outperforms the .44 Magnum because the amount of damage increase from Molar PP to Glock is quite high, while the actual rate of fire and handling remains similar. Compared to the .44 Magnum, the damage increase is much smaller between these two than it is between these two. And of course, the ammunition only also with the .44 Magnum, other than just being rare, only has 60 capacity per slot, make it much harder to carry a lot of it around. And the 6 shots per magazine, having to reload after only 6 shots, also hampers the ability on this weapon, and of course a lower rate of fire. Really makes it a very niche weapon if usable at all. That we are now going on to the two different shotguns, which are the 12 gauge pump action and semi-automatic. I'm not gonna try to pronounce the semi-automatic's name, but since I'm not really I'm able to speak Swedish, so I'm just gonna skip that. And these both are single shot reloading, so as you guys can see, it doesn't use a magazine, which means you can cancel the reload halfway and only have 3 or 4 shots. Basically, you do have to wait until the number goes up before it really for it to count. So do watch out for that. They're short range self-defense weapons for the most part. They accept 3 kinds of ammunition, which are .12 gauge buckshot, slug, and birdshot. Slugs are the single shot, pretty much sniper ammunition. Buckshot and the birdshot both have, of course, multiple projectiles per shot. With the birdshot, which is actually the yellow variant, as you can see here, this slug being green, buckshot being red. Birdshot has the highest amount of projectiles, and then comes buckshot, but the buckshot overall has a better damage output and better accuracy, which basically has gains its favor overall on the overall player base, as far as I noticed. That said, in terms of the experimental variants, it's the pump action here that has the experimental variant. However, because the experimental pump action is in a kind of weird state right now, it isn't necessarily better. So this is actually one of the two weapons pair that has a big reason to discuss because both have their own points. The pump action, of course, fires much slower, having to pump after each shot, but it accepts the 1.4 times shotgun scope, which, by the way, does not accept any vision modules. That's one. It's the only scope other than the red dot that does not like the actual. There's only actual scope that doesn't accept any vision modules, and it can also accept the silencer. So it actually can be a very stealthy close quarters weapon, which limits the chance of the robots actually noticing you compared to the actual gun sounds. While the semi-auto has the higher rate of fire and higher damage potential between the two. It does not accept any vision modules, and it only accepts the shotgun choke. Furthermore, when entirely empty, it will attempt only to reload one shot. You actually have to press the reload button to reload the other ammunition. The pump action does also accept the shotgun choke, which is an accuracy enhancing um, um, attachment. but it is much more flexible, of course, than the semi-automatic because of the other two attachments that can be put on there. The pump action actually does accept red dot scopes as well, which is also a pretty nice thing to have. Well, the semi-auto doesn't accept any scopes. These are they both have the pros and cons, and the experimental pump action also has the pros and cons. You can basically pick among the three and decide which one is better for yourself. Because of how common the ammunition type is, you can pretty much go anywhere with these guns and be sure to find ammunition for them, which is pretty nice. And going on to the SMGs, we got the HP5, which is basically MP5, and the COPPA, which is a derivative of the M3 grease gun, which was originally a World War II American SMG. These are really similar weapons. The COPPA SMG has a slightly higher damage output, but a lower rate of fire, and as you can see, I got pretty controlled pretty well. Grouping is decent. Pretty quick reload speed for a weapon like this, and you do have to extend magazine, and it goes from 36 to 15.1 in total. I do have to say, with the extended magazines on SMGs, that the pictures on the two are swapped around. So the HP5 extended magazine, which is the one that is basically the banana magazine, has the picture of the straight magazine, which actually should be on the COPPA, which has set straight magazine, but the COPPA magazine has the diagonal or curved magazine picture. So from 35 to 51, and the HP5 goes from 30 to 45 with its attachment. And in comparison, the HP5 has a higher rate of fire, lower damage, but it's a bit harder to control. It definitely climbs up a lot more, as you guys can see when I stop trying to control it. And its accuracy overall worse than the COPPA. Before the experimental COPPA came around, the HP5 was generally favored because it's higher DPS, even though it was less accurate, harder to control, and less ammo efficient than the COPPA. The higher damage output did appeal to a lot of people. In terms of attachments, these have quite a decent amount of attachments. As said, you of course have the extended magazines of each of them. They have the SMG compensator, which reduces recoil, and the SMG silencer, which of course silences the weapon. Even though it isn't really silent, it's more suppressor. Doesn't really matter. In game, they're called silencers. So that's it. They only accept the 2x dot scope. They don't accept any other scopes. Of course, you can use the iron sights. Those are not really good or bad. And the ammunition type they use are the 9mm full metal jacket and armor piercing ammunition types, which is the brown color. And the ammunition type is really common overall, pretty much findable at any location, which makes it a good choice wherever you are. That said, now there is of course the experimental COPPA SMG, which has a much higher rate of fire, which basically blows the HP5 out of the water, because the HP5's pros were the higher rate of fire and the higher damage potential, but because of the higher rate of fire and the higher damage per shot of the experimental COPPA, it has the higher damage output and the higher ammo efficiency, which basically makes it better than both the 5-star variants, and you should be using the experimental one if you have it above these two at pretty much any given time. That said, we are now going to be going over to the rifles. The moisture hunting rifle and the Elginster hunting rifle are the two main subjects here, and that said, they do accept different scopes. The Moiser and Elginster both accept up to the 6 to 12 times scope, from the 1 to 4, 4 to 8, and then 6 to 12 times scopes. And with them, you can have pretty versatile overall range variations. Some people like the 1.4 scope, and the 6.12, as you can see, can actually magnify quite far. But of course, they do have their own iron sights as well, which you could use, even though they're not really great. The Moiser is the starter variant, which is again most useful in the starter locations because its ammunition gets kind of rare when you get further than the starter location. Both weapons have, in the ammunition, have a soft point, which is these are the only weapons that have soft point and full metal jacket variants, and have 120 rounds per slot capacity. The Moiser is a 5-shot bolt action weapon, and you can actually reload the bolt, like have the bolt reload without actually having to zoom out of the scope. And the Moiser has a 5-round capacity compared to the Moiser's 4-round. That said, the Agutster has a slightly higher damage output, which is just enough to allow it to have the silencer and be at a longer distance, and still one-shot runners at their weak fuel cell. And also one-shot the Apocalypse and Phoenix runners more consistently compared to the Moiser hunting rifle. That said, they're all both pretty solid choices, very ammo efficient, and in my opinion, just joy to use. Of course, we do have the heavy weapons now, which I'm going to cover next, and which are the .50 caliber Panzerverbandgewehr 90 and the Grenadgewehr M49. The okay, so apparently the 50 cal decided to glitch out, something I cannot really do anything about, which is really annoying. Let's see if I can actually fix that somehow. Okay, now the game thinks I have 2 M49s. Alright. Okay, so I guess you guys are gonna have to get my word on the oh, there it is. Here we go. Here's the 50 cal anti-material rifle, or high caliber sniper rifle. The Panzerverbandgewehr is of course the Barrett 50 cal. It takes .50 caliber ammunition, which is the full metal jacket or armor piercing variant, but it has a pretty abysmal ammunition per slot ratio of only 40 rounds per slot. And on top of that, the .50 cal only accepts scopes of 612 or 8 to 16 magnification. If you don't have either of those, you're gonna have to run with the iron sights. And before it didn't actually have iron sights, so then you really were having a problem. But later on, they did add iron sights to this weapon, which is pretty nice. It has its own extended magazine, while the Moiser and Angler do not have an extended magazine. And base capacity of this thing is 18 rounds. Actually, that is not the base capacity, because the game thinks I'm still having the extended magazine attached. Let's see if I can wake it up. Apparently I cannot. Apparently the game thinks I'll always have 18 rounds capacity. Alright. So, having the game's bugs, leaving those out of here. The Panzerverbandgewehr has a very high rate of fire, pretty good accuracy, but a lot of recoil. So you will definitely knock back yourself a lot. And it has the highest armor piercing potential among all of the weapons in game, other than maybe the Panzerverbandgewehr, but that one is more explosive, so it doesn't really count. And it is probably one of the most powerful weapons in game, especially if you have the experimental variant, which, since it has the ability to shoot multiple targets at once, basically has infinite armor penetration. And because it ignores armor, it also hits every single component the bullet passes through. And just because of that power it has, it is actually, again, one of the best guns in the game because of the raw damage output. It does use a lot of ammunition, and you will use a lot of ammunition slots before to carry said ammunition. So you're definitely going to need a lot of inventory space for this weapon, but I actually do say it is worth it overall, being one of the best weapons in the game overall, and definitely the best sniper between the 3 of them. And then we're going to go on to the biggest gun, of course. I think I'm going to actually take this one outside, which is the Grenadgewehr M49. And now apparently the game thinks that my... Huh. Alright, the game is definitely minding its own business today. So the Grenadgewehr M49 is pretty much the bazooka, although of the game it's more of a recoilless rifle specifically. It fires a single shot before having to reload. That single shot does have high explosive properties, so do not get too close to it. you will hurt yourself. You can even kill yourself with this thing. And as said, it has the largest ammunition in the game, which is the high explosive dual purpose round, which has a capacity of up to 4. Although there are other different ammunition types than the HEDP. There's the smoke round, which basically does nothing because it only gives you a smoke screen, and the smoke screen does not actually block vision for the robots. The robots will continue to attack you through the smoke. And the other ammunition type it has are chaff rounds, which are also not really useful, and EMP rounds, which are actually really useful in a group scenario because you can stun the robot and keep it stun locked, which is really useful against the Apocalypse and Phoenix tanks, especially if they are rifles. And the experimental variant of the grenade gewehr basically loads 2 shells in at once and then fires them in a quick succession as a burst fire weapon. And overall, there's better damage output, better burst potential because you can fire both shots, peek around the corner, fire both shots, and then take the longer reload because the reload time is longer on the experimental variant. And then get back out and fire both rounds again. Overall, once you have the experimental, there's no reason to run the 5-star variant, but if you are going anywhere, be sure to bring your grenade and at least like 8 rounds of HEDP, because it is your best bet against tanks and harvesters, and overall just the most efficient way of taking them out in a short time. And now we are going to go on to the 7.62 millimeter ammunition weapons, which are the Grenadier Gewehr 4, and the AI-76 or the AK-47 assault rifle, and also the KVM-59 machine gun, which I will cover after this one, these two. So the assault rifles, of course, are the HD4 and the AK-47. The AK-47 has burst fire, automatic, and semi-automatic firing modes, with, of course, the burst being 3-round burst. And it has a base ammo capacity, if I grab the extended magazine of it, of 30, and goes up to 45. And similarly, the current for HG5 is actually the exact same, but HG4 only has a base of 20 and goes to 35. The extended magazines in both cases give you 15 rounds of extra ammunition, but with the Micro 4, because of the lower base capacity, it has a lower end capacity as well. A Micro 4 only is semi-automatic and automatic, no burst fire, so it has less flexibility, but it has more flexibility in the scope attachments because the HG4 is the only assault rifle that has access to the 4 to 8 times scope. And it does accept vision modules, just like the HD5 and the other sniper rifles. And with this and the semi-automatic mode, it can make a pretty long-range DMR weapon. Furthermore, you can silence it with the silencer, give it more accuracy with the barrel extender, or lower the recoil with the compensator. With the Azoros, of course, having those 3 different barrel extensions, that you have a lot of options with this weapon, and it is actually the experimental assault rifle from the tree. The HG4 does turns as fire rounds, incendiary rounds that do bonus damage against components, basically improved critical hit damage. And that's that. It is a very easy to handle weapon. Very low recoil. It's very easy just to keep it on target, and it is very accurate. And those are the main pros of this weapon. Compared to that, the AK-47 has a lot more recoil and can be quite difficult to keep under control sometimes. However, the AK-47 has a much higher damage potential than the HD4, and actually rivals that of the experimental HD4. So generally, people do choose the AK-47 over the HD4, even though it can only accept the red dot scope. It also, of course, has the extended magazine and the barrel extensions of all assault rifles. And as we're going to go on to the last of the 7.62 weapons, which is the KVM-59 machine gun. Very long reload time, of course, as any machine gun. It has the highest magazine capacity of any weapon in the game at 250. So even having just one full slot of this 7.62 ammunition, which is armor, I've brought armor piercing here, but let's see if I can, here full metal jacket, and here I have full metal jacket. So I'm just gonna put the full metal jacket in here and see you can actually have 250 rounds in a single magazine, which means that it can eat up an entire slot worth of ammunition before having to reload. That's a lot of ammunition, guys. Do not underestimate the amount of firepower this thing can dish out in a single engagement. That's said because of the very long reload. Once you do run out of ammo, you really don't want to reload. You really want to swap to another weapon and start shooting with that weapon. But that said, after firing 250 rounds of 7.62 ammunition downrange, you generally have killed most things except maybe tanks and harvesters. But you can definitely kill multiple runners, seekers, ticks, and even hunters in a single magazine. It accepts both the machine gun silencer and compensator, uh, which does give us some flexibility. And sort of sights, it only accepts the red dot scope. You can, of course, go with the iron sights, and this is actually one of the few weapons where I really advise using the iron sights, because the iron sights are really nice. And with the iron sights, because of the way the gun wiggles, the front of the barrel actually remains really stable, while the rear wiggles quite a lot. And because of the red dot scope being pretty far to the rear, the red dot scope wiggles way more than the front of this sight. And since the shots basically fly out where the front of the sight is, you have much less jiggle on your screen, which is overall like a really nice thing to have. That's why I really like advise you running just the iron sights on the KVM 59. The machine gun, of course, is one of the really hard to obtain weapons if you do not have the DLC, because it only drops from the Apocalypse enemies, such as, of course, this Apocalypse Hunter here. And those are mostly found on the DLC island, but they do occasionally spawn on the mainland as well, but at a much lower rate than over here. So if you really want to get these machine guns, also the other one, the KVM 89, consider getting yourself the DLC, even just for just having an easier time getting these two weapons. Of course, I do have to say that you really need an extended magazine with these weapons, because the base capacity on this weapon is only 50, which is only 5 rounds more than a fully upgraded AI 76. And that said, it does go up really, really fast if you get the extended magazines. And that's it. We're gonna now overall judgment here. All three weapons are still like really good all-around weapons. People basically pick and choose between the AK 47 and the experimental HD4. Which one they like better, whether they really want to have the burst fire and all the tactical stuff on the AK, or really want to have the scope and the more like medium to long range power of the HG4. Those are really like the main topics between these two weapons. But the KVM 59 kind of throws it out the window with the high DPS, the long sustainability, and etc. etc. And overall, I would favor the KVM 59 over the two assault rifles. Of course, my opinion. Don't have to take my word on it. Try the three of them out. They are kind of similar, and it's really open to like which one do you prefer. And as we're gonna go on to the last two weapons of today, which are the HD5 and the KVM 89. The HD5 accepts the 1 to 4 times zoom scope, but not the 4 to 8 times zoom scope. So it is somewhere in between of the AK and the HD4. It does accept the scope, but it is not as good as the other scope. It also only has semi and full auto, and of course it does use the different ammunition type, and which is the 5.56 full metal jacket or armor piercing rounds. I do only have the full metal jacket here, but they are the yellow boxes. This is the rarer ammunition type between 9mm SMG 7.62 and this one, and it's mainly found up north around these areas right here, and down south you're gonna have a harder time finding ammunition for these. So that said, they have very similar damage outputs to the HG4 and AK-47, both of these, but are overall much easier to control, which that's the biggest advantage um, of these. And Other than that, they're not really like too interesting in terms of like what they can do. 30 rounds to 45, just like the AK. Same barrel extensions, etc. as the AK on the HG5. But overall, just the handling of this weapon is so good. I'm just slightly sliding down my mouse there. I'm just gonna show you guys how much recoil there is when I just don't do anything at all. It comes really slowly, and it's really easy just to keep it on a single target. That's why I actually really like this weapon, and I generally I myself run it with, of course, with the red dot side, which makes it like seem as though there's even like less recoil, and with that, it's just a really comfortable weapon to use. And again, it's not anything special, but just the comfort that you can get out of using one of these weapons is definitely there, and definitely something that you should consider. And lastly, we have the KVM-89 squad automatic weapon. Carrying 200 rounds in its ammunition, it does 50 rounds less than the KVM-59. However, it is much easier to control. Even though the spring wiggles a lot, the actual climb on this weapon is only slightly worse than the HD5, and it is very similar to the AK-47. So if you're used to controlling an AK-47, the KVM-89 will suit you pretty well, while the KVM-59 has a even worse recoil. And it's another one of those weapons that I don't quite know whether you want to have the red dot or just the iron sights, because again, the rear jiggles a lot, while the front only just slightly climbs. But this is the only 5-star weapon, as far as I know, that doesn't have any illuminating green points on the iron side. So it is fully dark, and when it is actually night like this, and you actually are in the shadows, etc., it does slightly lose its qualities because it is not illuminating, but it isn't quite dark enough right now to show. But if you are actually sitting in the shadow and you're shooting like a phoenix target, it might sometimes be hard to know where exactly you are aiming, and that's something to keep in mind. That said, the control of this weapon is really nice, and it is very similar to the KVM-59 in its overall capabilities. There's nothing really too special about it. Again, just a machine gun, but again, if you want to get it, you do have to go over to the DLC island or murder a whole bunch of apocalypse class enemies. And just like the KVM-59, the base magazine size is very abysmal, only 40 rounds. With both the machine guns, you really need your magazine extensions before they are at least somewhat useful. And yeah, that is gonna be a lot of grinding, because the drop downs of these, as far as I notice, are really, really low. And that's actually the thing that I would say holds back the two weapons the most, and that's why you don't see them that often, just because of the scarcity rather than whether they're good or not. And I would definitely suggest having at least one of these two in your arsenal. And now we're just gonna go over to recapping. Overall, what I would say, what I do as a actual like loadout, would be the 50 caliber anti-material rifle, and of course the grenade caval. Probably an experimental K-pist, that, or a experimental HG4. Either would work. Although with the experimental HG4, since I do kind of want to bring the KVM-59, you would be in conflict with ammunition, so I actually probably wouldn't actually bring that one. And of course, expendable Glock 17. And you don't really need anything else. 5.56 ammunition. You don't really want to carry that, or like you don't want to carry out too many ammunition types. Overall, this setup here works really well. You have your secondary, you have your long range, you have your anti-tank and anti-harvester weaponry, you have your close quarter option, and you have your overall balanced murder anything option. Yeah, that's really what I would actually suggest running. Also, because 4 of the 5 can be experimental, that also kind of helps here. And yeah, that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed watching. Hope this was informative, and I will see you guys all in the next one. See you guys.